This year, I swapped my 16-inch MacBook Pro for an M1 Mac Mini, and this has left me with a huge question. What does the word Pro mean to Apple these days? Welcome back to Mark Ellis Reviews, and thank you as always if you have hit that subscribe button. If you haven't, just hit it now. Simple. Very quick shout out to this video's sponsor, which is NordPass. And NordPass is this brilliant password manager which remembers, as you guess, all your passwords, but it also makes signing up to new websites super fast. It remembers all of your credit card details securely. It's just a massive time saver and I cannot recommend it enough. And the best news is at the moment they are offering 50% off if you sign up with the code Mark Ellis. You also get a month free. So to grab that 50% discount from NordPass, head over to nordpass.com/Mark Ellis or just use the code Mark Ellis at checkout. So every video I've made in 2021 has been made with the M1 Mac Mini. Before that, I was using the 16-inch MacBook Pro. That cost me twice as much, a bit more so actually, than the M1 Mac Mini. Now, I'm not joking when I say I cannot tell a difference in terms of performance when it comes to 4K video editing between that 16-inch MacBook Pro and the M1 Mac Mini. I just can't. The M1 Mini is just as good as the 16-inch MacBook Pro in terms of professional video editing. And that really got me thinking, does that make me less of a professional? Does it make me less pro because I'm not using an Apple device without a Pro moniker after the name? And in fact, the more I think about it, I don't actually use an Apple Pro Mac at the moment. So I have my M1 Mac Mini, I have the iMac behind me, and I have an M1 MacBook Air. None of them are pro machines. And I don't know, it got me thinking, I consider myself to be a professional. I do video editing, I do audio editing, I write for a living, I use Macs. But I'm no longer at the moment using a MacBook Pro or an iMac Pro or a Mac Pro because I'm not rich. Now obviously it doesn't make me any less professional. I'm still doing a job and making money from doing this sort of stuff. And I think the bigger problem here is that word pro is causing lots of buyer confusion, or if I'm honest, a feeling of inadequacy among those who have opted for the non-pro machine and then they've regretted that decision further down the line. In this video, I'm going to try and explain that it doesn't matter which machine really you go for, and if you think you are a professional at something, you are. That's your definition. But also, I think there is something Apple can do to make this whole thing a lot easier. So let's look at the current lineup of Apple Pro devices. We have the MacBook Pro, the iMac Pro, the AirPods Pro, the Mac Pro, the iPhone 12 Pro, and the iPad Pro. I've probably missed something out there, but they're the main ones. And if we break that down, can a pair of noise-cancelling in-ear headphones be called professional? And also, can an iPhone, a smartphone, be called professional? I think these questions are worth asking as well because these devices have the same naming convention as the Mac Pro, and the Mac Pro is Apple's flagship, admittedly professional computer. If you spec the Mac Pro up, you can go way beyond £20,000-30,000. It's an incredibly expensive machine if you want it to be. And it's clearly made for high-end, time-sensitive work. It has a place in the market. And in that sense, it should be called Pro, but iPhone Pro, AirPods Pro, iPad Pro. The things that you get for it being Pro are a higher refresh screen rate, slightly bigger screen, thinner bezels, Face ID. That's it, actually. You get that LiDAR sensor on the back, which no one needs to use. But there's nothing else that distinguishes it, like you get the distinguishing features between a Mac Pro and, let's say, an iMac. They're very, very different computers. It just doesn't make sense to me, this Pro moniker that Apple uses. I think it used to. It was very clearly a definition in the past between a standard MacBook and one which was designed for professional use. But again, this just begs the question, and it's a question for Apple, what does the word pro mean? So how do you define if you are a professional? Well, I think pro, being professional, is a very subjective term. I consider myself to be professional because I edit videos which end up contributing to my business in terms of revenue. That's the definition of being a professional as far as I'm concerned. But I'm also professional in terms of blogging. I write for a living as well. But you might be a bedroom music producer and you may only make music for your own enjoyment. Or you might be an aspiring novelist where you go and sit in your favourite coffee shop and tap away on your MacBook Air. You could just be a hobbyist photographer who takes landscape photos at the weekend. Or you might be a software developer who is working for a great big conglomerate or a little startup or whatever it might be. Now, if you fall into any of those brackets and you consider yourself professional enough to need a professional level machine, That's absolutely fine. Professionalism is something that we define ourselves, and you don't have to make money from it. I know I said it earlier that from my perspective, being a pro is making revenue and building a business from doing tasks on a computer. But that doesn't have to be the definition. No one can or should tell you whether or not you are professional. If you think you are, you are. And you can get the work done that you need to get done to be professional on any machine of your choosing. Okay, if you get a cheaper Mac or cheaper Windows computer, it might take you longer to do certain things, but that's how it fits into your budget. You know, you just have to wait a bit longer. That's not the end of the world. So choose any device which is personal to you and which makes you be the professional you need to be. Now, when I first started my business back in 2015, I was using an 11-inch MacBook Air, the original one. I didn't use that for long. I then upgraded to the 2016 MacBook Pro, but I went for the base level version. I literally did not add anything to it at all. It had 8 gig of RAM, it had the slowest processor you could get. It was just terrible, and it also didn't have the touch bar, so that was the era where the touch bar came into being. You know, it had less ports than the other MacBook Pros. A lot of people called it the escape key Mac because it didn't have the touch bar, like I mentioned, and it was just seen as being a bit of a filler in Apple's product lineup. I ran that machine until 2019. I built a business out of it. And a little fun fact, that machine is still being used in a marketing agency that I do some work with occasionally, and it works fine. Do they see that machine as being professional? They certainly do. And it holds a very special place in my heart. You know, I edited video on it. I cut my teeth really in terms of editing video on that computer, and I built a profitable business with it. So again, if you can only afford the cheapest Mac you can get and you want to use it professionally to either make money or just build a hobby or whatever it might be, go for it. I want to mention the M1 Mac Mini again, and I'll leave a link to the video review I did of that machine up here. I can't emphasize enough how incredible that computer is. For the price, I mean, mine cost me, like I say, less than half the cost of my original 16-inch MacBook Pro, and it runs my entire business. And every week I edit 2 or 3 4K videos on it with no problem at all. Now, it's got 16 gig of RAM, which by today's standards isn't a lot for if you want to do professional video editing. And again, compared to that 16-inch MacBook Pro, when I'm editing video or audio, it's silent. It never gets hot, the fans never come on, and compared to that 16-inch MacBook Pro, which would just sound like an aircraft trying to take off, it's just silent. It just breezes through the day. And I can confidently say that M1 Mac Mini is the most professional machine I've ever owned. And that says it all. So how can Apple change this perception of pro? I think they can do something fairly radical, and bear with me on this. I think they should drop the Pro name completely. I think if you want a MacBook or an iMac or whatever it might be, you buy the one that you want, you spec it up to whatever you need, whatever fits in your budget, and that's it. It's your MacBook. I genuinely think the Pro name, because it's being used in devices like this now, it's diluted. It doesn't make a huge amount of sense anymore. But more importantly, that's a marketing issue, by the way. That's a marketing problem for Apple. That's not really for us to worry about, although it does create buyer confusion. The bigger problem is the image it gives. And I see it on comments on my videos on here and also on my Medium blog posts. There is an element of snobbery about the Pro line of MacBooks and the iMac and the Mac Pro. You know, if you're doing video editing, you can't do that on an M1 Mac Mini. You know, you should be using a MacBook Pro for that. That isn't the case. I'm proving that by running this channel and making these videos with a non-Pro device. I just think the Pro name causes more issues than it's worth. And if Apple dropped it completely, it would, one, make the buying process easier because you just pick the base level and then add the bits that you need. And also it would get rid of this kind of lingering nastiness and pretentiousness about that Pro name. Will Apple ever do that? Probably not, to be honest, but I just wanted to make my point really. And let me know what you think. Should Apple remove the word Pro from their product lineup? Let me know in the comments. If you're still confused about which M1 Mac to buy, I will leave all of my buying guide links in the video description, but keep watching if you want to see the buying guide for the M1 Mac Mini, if that's the particular machine you're excited about. I'll put a link at the end of this video. But in the meantime, as always, thank you for watching, and I will catch you in the next video.